All right, good afternoon, everybody. And for those of you who were at Cafe and Grill last night with me, Cousin Joe says thank you. I think we made that bar very, very proud. It was a good time. So I'm happy to do the initial introduction here. I'm joined by Seth, who has got the main event to share with you today, the presentation that we have. But we're here to talk about AI-driven personalization at scale. Some of you will have already been at the breakout session that happened earlier today at 11, where this was presented. I think there's actually handouts on everybody's chairs from Bounteous that will explain more. And I think actually there was a little video earlier on today that we saw also. So Seth is here, and what we really want to focus on for you is start with this sort of idea. I know Mark Grannon was here from Forrester, but generally I think we all understand that a customer experience, a great customer experience, may be the most important priority right now. And there's a lot of reporting around that, there's a lot of writing around that, but it perhaps poses the question of what really goes into delivering that. And as we think about that, and as we work with Bounteous, our partner on that, there's a couple of important things here that we've identified. What we're here to really speak about is how do we anticipate needs? What does it take to anticipate needs and to deliver to you a great experience? And so what we wanted to do was to begin by just looking at an example. And so this is an incredible brand, Wilson. I think everybody knows this company. And the way they've really worked on their experience is, I think, a great example of what we've been talking about for a number of years now. How do we use lifestyle content? How do we think about really immersive imagery? How do we move beyond just having a simple catalog, but actually trying to deliver an experience that is very, very compelling to you, whether your interests are in any of the product categories that they're representing here. And that's very clear, and this work has done a really nice job. It's actually an example of very standard work using marketing personas. And that's worked really well for Wilson. In fact, if we jump just to a few years ago, in 2016 at Engage, Wilson won an award. They would have, we need to get them a jacket actually, but they won an award because they had some incredible results using that kind of traditional marketing methods for persona development and using a rich content experience to give you the kind of digital experience that would result in these kinds of impacts. But the question that we want to pose today, and the question that I really want Seth to try and answer for us, is that enough? Is that really enough today to win and to succeed and to stand out? And so what Bounteous has done is really combined its combination, and I'll try to get the slide here, its combination of really thinking about expertise in Lift, in our personalization software, and combining that with their expertise in the Google Marketing Platform. And so it's a really interesting combination of technology wrapped in their expertise of services that's really answering this question and delivering a solution to you. So, Seth, let's have you come up. I'll pass this to you. I'll go back and sit there, and I'll look very serious, so that can
All right, thank you, Joe.
Help us through
everybody. So as Joe mentioned, I want to talk a little bit first about artificial intelligence, and then I'll talk more about how it kind of applies into the world of marketing. So first, sort of broadly speaking, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence has been a part of the field of computer science for decades. I first learned about it when I was in college back in the late 80s, and it's been gaining slow traction. And the idea behind artificial intelligence itself, more broadly speaking, is using data, using algorithms, using technology to start understanding and processing input, to start using that information to actually do reasoning, right, to learn from that information, and ultimately to kind of drive interaction, right? So the big promise of sort of that broad artificial intelligence was all about thinking machines, right? Sort of that dynamic capability to interact no matter what the situation is. And there's still some work to be done. There's been a lot of progress there in the decades. But what's really interesting, I think, in the last few years in particular, is the advent of what's known as narrow AI, or as I like to think of it, kind of accelerated intelligence. Right, so the idea behind narrow AI is taking some of the algorithms, the processing techniques, and that kind of stuff that's part of the broad field of artificial intelligence, but applying it to a narrowly defined problem, right? Bound it in a fairly finite state so it's sort of easier to solve, right? And so what we see here is algorithms and techniques, right, that are actually there to understand data, to start making predictions within kind of a limited field, and even make decisions, right, and that kind of stuff. So this is exciting. This has actually enabled quite a few things, and even the evolution of the ability to do narrow AI over the last few years has been tremendous and really moved through the hype cycle. It wasn't too many years ago when we were working on a project and trying to basically run some machine learning on a single server and ran out of memory. Because any even slightly meaningful problem takes a lot of processing power to really make deep inferences, right? So it moved to the cloud, and then from there, it's become really commodified. And there are platforms that actually make it easy that you don't even need to be a data scientist to do certain kinds of applications, right? So this has been a huge evolution and has really driven capabilities for business at long last and realizing a true promise behind it. So I'll talk first about kind of a basic application of narrow AI that you all should be familiar with, which is image recognition, right? Many of us use that to lock our phones and unlock our phones. And the idea behind it is to take basically a few physical attributes out of the image, apply that against learned patterns, right? And based on that, make an inference and identify, either as an individual, is it me trying to unlock my phone? Traditionally, even just looking at images, is a cat, is it a dog, is it a boat, things like that. So it's pretty interesting. It's complex in its way, but it's been very commodified. But one of the interesting ways it can be applied to marketing is really to look as you're importing images and assets into the DAM to actually process them and automatically tag them with metadata, right? So if you've got thousands of assets that need tagging, rather than trying to do that manually, AI can actually help. But AI can do so much more for marketing. And so we like to think about it really as journey optimization, right? This is where the promise starts coming in. This is where we start thinking about really impact on the bottom line and on the experience. So things like lead prioritization and optimization around lead to revenue management, things like content attribution modeling, right? Really understanding the points in someone's journey that makes a difference and sort of focusing on those and allowing you to focus your marketing spend so you can optimize how am I spending money in my digital ecosystem? Where are the right places? What are the right levers to move? And all that together, we are great and powerful things, but the one thing I really want to talk about is personalization at scale. So I'll go back to Wilson, right, and kind of posit the question again that Joe asked, which is, and maybe slightly differently, are marketing-based personas enough? Right, and it's a good question to ask, I think. I want us all to really be thinking about that. If we think about sort of the spectrum of anticipating needs, right, one of the core things for making a great experience, you have on the one end of the spectrum the notion of a one-size-fits-all site, right? Or a page that doesn't, there's no optimization, no personalization. Many of our sites have plenty of that. There's, a good place for that. On the far end is that really individualized experience, right? Getting to know individuals and tailoring to them. I would say marketing-based personas are kind of in the middle. And they're powerful, right? Using that for personalization. We've seen double-digit, improvement in conversion and ROI, stuff like that from it. But as we think about, again, the question, is it enough? I want to dive a little bit deeper into the Wilson experience again. So as Joe mentioned, we went through kind of the traditional process, worked with them to identify 8 key marketing personas, their needs, and all that kind of stuff. And this was good, right? I mean, the results were great. But if we start thinking about that, right, if we look at these personas and think about, for example, the parent, right? No one coming to the site is a generic parent, right? They're real individual people behind those personas, right? So the closer you can get to the individual people, or as we think of them, high-fidelity personas, the better targeting you're going to be able to do. So I want to talk about a real person, actually, who's had a recent shopping experience on Wilson. We'll call him Doug. Doug makes 6 figures. He has 2 sons, 8 and 13-year-old. Back in the day, he owned an A2K mitt, loved baseball because of that, really got into it. And now that his children are reaching that age, he wants to get them into sports, right? So this is not like every parent, right? This is, not all parents are like him. This is kind of a distinct person. And the journey becomes even more distinct when we dive into it. So as I mentioned, he thinks back to his youth, now that his kids are getting of age, when he had his own A2K mitt, when he broke it in, when he started developing a love of baseball and playing catch with his dad, and he wants to recapture that. His oldest son is getting to that age. And so they decide to go to Wilson because that's what Doug owned. And they find out that on Wilson now, you can actually go in and look up your favorite athlete and find out what they use, right? So Doug's son is a big Red Sox fan, and as it turns out, a big Mookie Betts fan, right? So super excited to go in and see what Mookie uses. And so it is an A2K glove, right? And he sees the kind of styling and customization that Mookie's done. So Doug and his son then go on and say, okay, this is great. That's what I want to get. So he goes and he's able to customize it. And he decides, I want to kind of do it in the spirit of Mookie, but now that I see all this customization, like I want to make it myself. Right? So this is a really fun project for the father and son together to work on this. Right? And so they place the order, and while they're waiting for that, they get a notification to check out a video on how to break in the glove. Right? So this is building the anticipation, right? And continuing to build a connection between Doug and his son throughout this entire process. And eventually the glove will arrive, right? And so they break it in and they start playing catch together, and the story goes on, right? They develop that closeness and the love of baseball. And so this is more than just like, hey, I need a glove and I want to get it in 2 days or less, right? Which is also an important aspect of commerce and an important part of Wilson's channel. But when you start thinking about some of the high-end merchandise that Wilson sells, this really high-quality, customizable stuff, you need more than that. You really want to get to an individualized connection. And this really worked, right? This is like a rite of passage. This is a family journey. And there's all sorts of similar journeys like this, like the young woman that's been watching Serena Williams in tennis for years and decides she's going to get into tennis and wants to buy the same equipment she uses, right? And the list goes on. So the power of making these connections and like understanding these people as individuals is huge. Because in this case, Doug went on to become 100% loyal to Wilson because of this connection they were able to make. So he never buys Rawlings now. We were able to cross-sell into DeMarini bats, which is another Wilson brand. For his church, he doesn't buy Nike balls anymore. He buys Wilson basketballs, right? That's deep loyalty that came out of a really connected experience, being seen and being understood by the system. And that turned into 10x household value, right, by doing that, which is just a huge impact. Right? Just the power of that is kind of amazing. And so getting there, right? How do we make that happen? The process for doing that is both combining left brain and right brain, as we like to think about it, right? So the right brain was all about everything that I just talked about, right? That emotional journey, those connections. But there's also a left brain, right? There's data and analysis behind that so that we're connecting the correct experiences with the people that'll be the most meaningful with, right? So if we go back to thinking about Doug, and that was a successful experience, and we want to do look-alike marketing. How do we do look-alike marketing with them, right? That's not an image recognition problem, right? We're not looking for people that physically look like Doug. We're not necessarily looking for a generic parent, right? And there might be a grandmother who's also, wealthy in retirement, has a granddaughter, wants to get her into softball and have a very similar journey, right? This is persona recognition. This is about understanding behavioral patterns, looking at data, things that have been entered by users, behavior that we observe through the site, and things that we infer using artificial intelligence to sort of bring all that together and actually recognize the high-fidelity personas. And this is an important thing when you think about sort of the Wilson ecosystem. We had kind of 8 basic personas there. But if you think about their broader experience, right, and the people coming to the site, and all the different factors that they might have, right, the different locations that they're in, the sports that they might be playing in, their income level, what their role is, right, as a parent or as a coach or as an actual player, and sort of their degree of capability in there, right? There are actually tens of thousands of combinations of these that can be reached. So that would be really, really difficult to do kind of in a whiteboard session, right, to capture all of that. But there are meaningful connections to be made. And so this is where the power of AI really comes in, right? And the process sort of follows like this. You start by analyzing the data and developing models around those high-fidelity personas, right? Looking at sort of the affinity and patterns of behavior throughout the site, through all those sort of different pieces of data, and looking what the real connections are. Then you start doing the path analysis, and of those sort of affinities within a high-fidelity persona, what paths are the most successful for the goals in the site? Based on that information, part 3, you start applying that, right? As new people come to the site, you observe the pattern, you identify which persona they're connected to, and then you use AI to optimize their path. This is where you start getting into really anticipating needs, because if you can understand that deep connection, you start nudging them in the right direction even before they realize that's where they wanted to go. That's powerful, right? That allows you to get really deep connections with your users, with your audience in ways that you've never been able to do before. So that's really what the power of AI can bring to really drive deep personalization at scale.
So, Seth posed this question to everybody, and I know we've worked for some time as partners on this, but the reason that we're here to talk about this is because Bounteous has actually done the work to build the integration and make this available. Maybe you could spend a moment just telling us why this combination of technology? Why is that the solution that you think is the right solution to deliver on what you've just talked about for everybody here?
Great, yeah, thanks. That's actually a great question. So a couple things, one of it is just bringing sort of the best in class of platforms together. Right? When I look at Acquia and think about their digital experience platform and Lift, we've had a lot of great success working with Lift. But their open architecture, right, is really what excited me about working with Acquia, because that allowed us to make it fairly straightforward to then plug in Google. And Google's got best-in-class AI platform as well as analytics. They've been rated in the top 5, and probably for years they've really been developing this platform. So bringing the two of them together to make all of this happen has just been exciting for us.
Good. Okay. So this is available now. So if people are interested, if they didn't see you today, how do we get in touch with you? It looks like it's this, but how do we find out more?
That's right. There's information to contact me on screen. You can shoot me an email or connect on LinkedIn and Twitter. Me and some of my teammates will also be out at the booth after this session. So hunt us down one way or another, and we'd love to talk more about it.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks a lot,
it.
Joe. Yeah,
Thanks very much,
appreciate it.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.